When I built my villa 30 years ago, I poured my heart and soul into it. Every brick, every corner had a memory. My late wife and I used to sit on the porch every evening, watching the sunset fade over the garden we planted together. That villa wasn't just a house, it was our life story, carved in stone. After she passed away, I decided to let my son, Michael, and his wife, Clara, move in. I wanted them to start their family where ours began. I trusted him completely. He was my only son, my pride. But life has a strange way of showing us who people really are. A few months after they moved in, Michael became distant. He stopped calling, stopped visiting me. I thought he was just busy. Then one Sunday, when I decided to surprise them with breakfast, I walked up to my own gate and saw a strange car parked in the driveway. A woman I didn't recognize opened the door and asked who I was. I smiled politely and said, "I'm Michael's father. I live here." She looked at me confused and said, "No, sir, this house belongs to my family now." My heart sank. I thought it must be a mistake. I called Michael immediately. He answered, sounding annoyed, and said, "Dad, you shouldn't come here. The villa's theirs now. I transferred the deed to Clara's parents." For a moment, I thought I misheard him. I asked, "You did what?" And he repeated, without a hint of regret, "It's theirs now. You're not allowed here anymore." I stood there in silence, feeling the world crumble under my feet. Then I just smiled and said quietly, "All right, son." I turned around, walked back to my car, and made one phone call. A call I never thought I'd have to make. It was to my lawyer. Because what Michael didn't know was that the villa was never fully his to give. When I hung up the phone, I sat quietly in my car for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. My hands were trembling, but not from anger, from disappointment. I never thought my own son would betray me like this. I wasn't a rich man when I built that villa. Every dollar I had went into that home. It wasn't just property. It was legacy. I started the engine and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Thomas, my lawyer for over 20 years, looked surprised when I told him what happened. "He can't transfer the property if it wasn't fully under his name," Thomas said, flipping through old documents I'd signed decades ago. I smiled faintly. "That's what I thought," I replied. "You see, when I let Michael and Clara move in, I had changed the papers, but not the ownership. The villa was placed in a trust under my name and could only be transferred after my death or with my signature. My son never knew that. I asked Thomas to prepare a legal notice immediately. Within an hour, papers were filed and the villa was legally frozen. No one could sell, rent, or claim it. By evening, I received a call from Clara's father. He sounded furious. "What kind of man tricks his own son?" he yelled. I laughed softly and said, "No, sir. What kind of father gets tricked by his son?" I ended the call and waited. 2 hours later, my son showed up at my door. He looked angry, eyes blazing, jaw tight. "Dad, what did you do? They're saying the house is blocked," he shouted. I calmly poured myself a cup of coffee and said, "Sit down, Michael. You and I need to talk." He didn't sit. "You embarrassed me in front of my wife's family," he screamed. I looked at him with the same eyes that once watched him take his first steps. "You embarrassed yourself, son," I said quietly. "You tried to give away something that was never yours." He froze. "What do you mean it wasn't mine? You said you gave it to us." "I let you live there," I corrected. "That's not the same as giving it to you. I trusted you to take care of it. Instead, you sold my memories." His face turned pale. "Dad, I needed to prove to Clara's parents that I could provide by stealing from your father?" I interrupted. The silence in the room was heavy. For the first time, I saw guilt flicker across his face. But it was too late for apologies. I stood up, walked to my desk, and handed him a copy of the legal papers. From this day on, you and Clara are no longer welcome there. The villa will be sold, and the money will go to charity in your mother's name. Michael's mouth fell open. You can't do that. Watch me, I said firmly. His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't waver. He had to learn that trust, once broken, takes a lifetime to rebuild. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. That night, I sat on the porch of my small rented apartment, watching the stars. I remembered the laughter that used to fill the villa, the smell of my wife's cooking, the warmth of family dinners. Now it was all gone. But strangely, I felt peace. Sometimes losing what you love most is the only way to find yourself again. A week later, Thomas called me with news. The in-laws had tried to contest the property claim, but the court rejected it instantly. The judge even called it an act of greed. The villa was back under my full control. I didn't go back there, though. Not yet. Some wounds take time to heal. A month passed before I finally drove to the villa again. The gate was rusty, the flowers wilted, and the laughter gone. As I walked through the garden, memories flooded back. My wife painting under the sun, Michael playing with his toy car, me fixing the old swing. I placed a small bouquet on the porch and whispered, "We did it, love. They couldn't take it from us." I locked the gate behind me and left quietly, deciding that the villa would become a home for orphaned children, kids who knew the value of love, not greed. Later that night, I received a short text from Michael. It said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong." I didn't reply. Some lessons need silence. But deep inside, I hoped one day he'd truly understand that wealth isn't about what you own. It's about the love you don't betray. Days turned into weeks after Michael's apology text, and though I never replied, his words stayed in my mind longer than I expected. I kept wondering if he truly meant it, or if it was just guilt talking. One rainy afternoon, as I was reading in my small apartment, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Michael was standing there, drenched, holding a cardboard box in his hands. His eyes were tired, his face unshaven. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He stepped inside, set the box down, and said, "I moved out. Clara left. Her parents, they don't talk to me anymore." I looked at him, unsure of what to say. He opened the box and pulled out a few old photo frames, pictures of us from when he was a child. "I found these in the attic before I left the villa," he said softly. I took one of the photos, a picture of his mother holding him as a baby, and for the first time in years, I saw tears in his eyes. "I messed up, Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought giving them the villa would make me look successful, but all that did was destroy everything that mattered." I didn't answer immediately. I just watched him, seeing the same little boy I once carried on my shoulders. Success isn't about what people think of you. It's about the kind of person you are when no one's watching. He nodded, wiping his face. Then he said something that took me by surprise. "I want to fix it. I want to help with the charity you mentioned, the one in Mom's name." That made me pause. I had already started the legal process to turn the villa into a home for orphans, but I hadn't told anyone. "Why?" I asked. "Because maybe," he said quietly, "if I do something good with you, I can start making things right." His words hit me deeply. For years, I had carried resentment and disappointment, but at that moment, I realized forgiveness is harder to give, yet more healing than revenge. So, I agreed. Over the next few months, we worked side by side renovating the villa. We painted the walls, repaired the roof, and planted flowers in the garden again, the same flowers his mother once loved. Slowly, Laughter returned to that empty house, not from us, but from the children who started living there. Every time I saw those kids smile, I felt like a part of my heart was being restored. Michael spent his weekends there, fixing playground swings and teaching the kids how to read. Sometimes I'd catch him sitting alone on the porch, looking up at the stars, whispering something, probably to his mother. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Michael turned to me and said, "Dad, thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at him and smiled. "You gave up on yourself, son. I just waited for you to come back." He laughed softly, the way he used to when he was young, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were family again. But life wasn't done teaching us lessons. A few months later, I started feeling weaker, tired, dizzy, short of breath. The doctor said it was my heart. Nothing too serious, but I needed rest. I didn't tell Michael right away. I didn't want him to worry. But one morning, as we were painting one of the villa's rooms, I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, and he was sitting by my bed, holding my hand. His eyes were red, and he whispered, "Don't you dare leave me now, old man." I smiled weakly. "Who's going to finish the playground if I do?" He laughed through his tears. In that moment, I realized something beautiful. Pain can break blood, but love can rebuild it stronger. We stayed in that room for hours, just talking about life, mistakes, forgiveness, and second chances. When I got discharged, I returned to the villa. The children ran to hug me, and Michael had already arranged everything perfectly. The garden was blooming again, the laughter was back, and though I still felt the ache in my chest, my heart had never been lighter. Because after losing everything, I had found something far greater. Not a house, not wealth, but the simple, unshakable bond between a father and his son who finally understood the true meaning of family.
Months passed and life slowly settled into a peaceful rhythm. The villa, once a place of pain and betrayal, had become a home filled with laughter, music, and the innocent joy of children who finally had a safe place to belong. Every morning I would wake up early, sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, and watch the sun rise over the garden. Michael would join me sometimes, his hands covered in paint or dirt from fixing something, and we'd talk about everything and nothing at the same time. It felt like the world had finally forgiven us. But time has its own way of reminding us that nothing lasts forever. One morning, as I was helping one of the children plant a tree, my chest tightened again. The pain was sharper this time, deeper. I tried to smile through it, but Michael noticed. He rushed to my side, panic in his eyes. "Dad, sit down, breathe," he said. But his voice sounded far away. I could hear the children shouting, someone calling for help, and then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed. The same white walls, the same smell of medicine. Michael was there, but this time he wasn't crying. He just looked scared. "You scared me again," he said quietly. I smiled weakly. "Guess I just wanted to make sure you still cared," I joked. He chuckled, but his eyes were full of tears he didn't let fall. The doctor said I needed surgery soon, or my heart might not last much longer. I could see the fear in Michael's face, the same boyish fear he had when he was little and thought monsters hid under his bed. "Don't worry, son," I said softly. "I've lived a full life. I'm proud of you." He shook his head. "No, Dad. You don't get to say that yet. Not now." I reached out and took his hand. "Then make me proud again. Keep this place running. Keep it alive." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room was filled with the beeping of machines and the quiet hum of life continuing just beyond the door. A few days later, the surgery took place. It went well, at least at first, But while I was in recovery, I heard Michael talking to someone outside my room, his voice low, determined. If anything happens to him, everything he owns goes to the foundation, right? Yes, Thomas, my lawyer, replied. That was his last wish. Then I want to add something. Make me a co-trustee. I want to make sure his dream never dies. My chest tightened again, but this time from pride. I closed my eyes, letting tears fall silently. For the first time, I knew my son had finally understood what legacy truly meant. Days turned into weeks, and though I slowly recovered, I felt my strength fading. I started writing letters, to Michael, to the children, even to Clara, though she might never read it. In my letter to Michael, I wrote, "Son, the villa was never about bricks or walls. It was about heart. You took it, broke it, and then rebuilt it stronger. That's life, that's family." One evening, when the sun dipped low and golden light spilled across the hospital room, Michael came in holding a small photo frame. It was of the villa, surrounded by children, flowers blooming all around. "They're calling it the Hope House now," he said softly. "Every room is full. Every child has a bed." I smiled faintly. "That's perfect. You'll come see it soon." I didn't answer. I just looked at him, memorizing his face, the man my boy had finally become. That night, as I drifted into sleep, I felt something warm, peaceful, almost familiar. I saw my wife again, standing by the old villa gate, smiling. "It's time to come home," she whispered. I took her hand. Somewhere far away, I heard Michael's voice calling, "Dad, wake up!" But I was already walking toward the light. The next morning, the villa bells rang softly as the children gathered in the garden. Michael stood quietly among them, holding a letter in his hands. His father's handwriting, shaky but strong, covered the page. He read the final line aloud. "When love becomes your legacy, you never really die." Tears streamed down his face, but he smiled through them. From that day on, Michael dedicated his life to the Hope House. Every child who entered its doors knew his father's name, and every flower that bloomed in that garden carried the memory of a man who lost everything, only to leave behind something eternal.
Years passed since my father's death, but not a single day went by when I didn't feel his presence. Hope House had grown beyond anything either of us ever imagined. What began as one villa had turned into a small community, a sanctuary for children who had no one else. We built classrooms, a library, a playground, even a small clinic. Every corner carried his memory, from the old wooden swing he once fixed to the rose garden he planted with my mother decades ago. People in town started calling it the house that healed, and in a way, it healed me too. But even as life moved forward, guilt still lived in the quiet corners of my heart. I often sat on the porch, the same one my father loved, and wondered if he truly forgave me before he died. One rainy afternoon, as I was sorting through old boxes in his study, I found something, an envelope with my name written in his shaky handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated a week before his passing. It read, "Michael, I knew you'd come back one day. That's why I never changed the locks. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did. It's about choosing to love them anyway. You were lost for a while, but you found your way home. Keep the villa alive, not for me, but for those who still need a place to belong." I sat there for hours reading those words over and over, tears mixing with the rain that slipped through the open window. That night I made a decision. Hope House wouldn't just be a home, it would be a movement. We would open new centers in nearby towns, reach more children, and spread the same love that my father had taught me. The next morning, I gathered the staff and told them about the plan. They looked at me, surprised, but when I told them about my father's dream, every single one of them nodded. "Let's do it," said one of the teachers, "for him." For the next year, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Donations started pouring in, volunteers came from all over the country, and soon Hope House had 3 new branches. Each one carried a piece of my father's story. Every new child who arrived heard about the man who built a home from heartbreak and turned pain into compassion. But amidst all the growth, life had another surprise waiting for me. One evening, as I was helping a little girl with her homework, a woman walked into the villa gates. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place her at first. Then she smiled, a soft, nervous smile, and said, "Hello, Michael." My heart stopped. It was Clara. I hadn't seen her in nearly 10 years. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The past, heavy with pain and regret, hung between us like a shadow. She finally said, "I heard about Hope House, about your father. I'm sorry. For everything." I looked at her, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to turn away, but another part remembered my father's words about forgiveness. "You don't need to apologize," I said quietly. "We both made mistakes." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I wish I had understood what mattered back then." "So do I," said softly. There was a long pause before she whispered, "Can I help?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment, then said, "If you really mean that, then yes. These kids could use another kind heart." And just like that, she stayed. At first it was strange, seeing her walk the same halls that once held our fights and regrets. But over time the tension faded. The children adored her. She became a teacher, patient and gentle, and for the first time in years, I saw the version of Clara I had fallen in love with long ago. Months turned into years again, and Hope House flourished. Clara and I never spoke about the past. We didn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't come from talking. It comes from doing good together. One evening, as the sun set behind the villa, I found myself sitting on the porch again, just like my father used to. Clara brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me. "You think he'd be proud?" I looked at the sky, where the first stars were appearing. "He already is," I said quietly. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment it felt like he was there, watching, smiling, maybe even laughing softly like he used to. I realized then that forgiveness doesn't just heal the person who receives it, it heals the one who gives it. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, light, and the legacy of love my father left behind, I finally felt free. 10 years had passed since Hope House began to spread beyond the borders of our small town. What once was a single villa born from a broken past had now become a worldwide movement. We had centers in 5 countries, hundreds of children being cared for, educated, and loved. Every new place we opened carried the same name, the same purpose, and the same inscription carved on the front wall. "When love becomes your legacy, you never really die." That line had become a symbol of everything my father stood for, and every time I saw it, that reminded me why I kept going. Clara and I now ran the foundation together. We were no longer husband and wife in the way we once were, but something deeper. 2 people connected by forgiveness, purpose, and shared redemption. The children called us Uncle Mike and Aunt Clara, and hearing that never failed to make me smile. Life had given me a second chance, one I never thought I deserved. But fate, as I had learned, always keeps one more surprise hidden. One evening, during a charity event in New York, I was invited to speak about the journey of Hope House. The hall was filled with hundreds of people, donors, journalists, and even a few of the grown-up children who had once lived in our first home. As I walked up to the stage, my heart pounded with emotion. I began, "This story didn't start with me. It started with a man who believed that even when the world betrays you, love can rebuild it stronger. My father lost everything.
yet somehow gave me everything. The crowd was silent, listening closely. I told them about the villa, the betrayal, the forgiveness, and the legacy of compassion that grew from it. When I finished, there was a standing ovation. But among all the applause, I noticed one young woman in the front row who wasn't clapping. She was crying. After the event, she approached me. "Mr. Carson," she said softly, "I grew up in Hope House, the one in Chicago. I just wanted to thank you. I'm in college now because of what you built." I smiled, feeling my chest tighten in the same familiar way it always did when emotion hit me too hard. "No," I said. "Thank you. You're the reason we keep building." She hesitated, then added, "When I was little, I used to sit under the big oak tree in the yard. I always felt like someone was watching over us. Maybe your father?" Her words stunned me for a moment. I didn't know what to say. "Maybe he still is," I finally whispered. That night, I went back to my hotel and couldn't sleep. I stepped out onto the balcony and looked up at the city lights shimmering like stars. I thought about my father, how he had forgiven me, how he had believed in me even when I didn't deserve it. I whispered into the cold air, "You were right, Dad. Love really does outlive us." The next morning, I received an email from a man named David Liu from Singapore. He had heard my speech and wanted to sponsor a new Hope House branch in Asia. I couldn't believe it. Within months, construction began, and I flew out to oversee it personally. The moment I walked into the half-built structure, I felt the same warmth I had felt decades ago when the first Hope House opened. The workers greeted me with smiles, and one of them handed me a small stone plaque they had carved, in memory of Jonathan Carson, the man who taught us that home is where the heart forgives. I stood there speechless, tears burning my eyes. My father's name now etched into stone on the other side of the world. He was gone, but somehow more alive than ever. That evening, I sat alone on the steps of the new building as the sun went down over the skyline. The air smelled of rain and concrete, but it reminded me of the garden back home. I closed my eyes and could almost hear the laughter of the children, the creak of the old swing, and the soft voice of my father saying, "Take care of them, son." A hand touched my shoulder. It was Clara. She had joined me on the trip. "You look like you're talking to him again," she said with a gentle smile. "Maybe I am," I replied. She sat beside me, and together we watched the workers finish for the day. The world felt quiet, peaceful. "Do you ever think we'll see him again?" she asked softly. I looked at the horizon where the sun was melting into gold and said, "He's never really gone, Clara. Every time a child laughs in one of these homes, every time someone chooses kindness over anger, that's him, that's us, that's what he left behind." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. The lights of the city flickered to life below, and the new Hope House stood tall against the darkening sky. It wasn't just a building. It was a heartbeat, a promise, a legacy that had started with pain but had grown into something immortal. And though I didn't know it yet, the story wasn't over, because the greatest test of love was still waiting for me, just around the corner.
2 years after the opening of Hope House Asia, life had become a rhythm of travel, construction, and endless meetings. From morning until night, I worked for the children, for the dream my father left behind. But beneath all the success, something inside me had started to feel heavy again. My body was slowing down, my heart weaker than before, and the doctors had started warning me about stress. "You've built enough, Michael," one of them said. "Now you need to rest." But how could I? Hope House had become more than a mission. It was the only thing that made me feel connected to my father. Then one evening, while reviewing reports in my office, my phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was trembling. "Michael,
"You need to come to Hope House, California. There's been an accident." My heart skipped. "What happened?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "One of the kids," she whispered. "A fire. They think it was electrical." My blood turned cold. Within hours I was on a plane, staring out the window, praying silently that everyone was safe. When I arrived, the smell of burnt wood filled the air. Part of the building was gone, reduced to ashes. Fire trucks and volunteers were everywhere. Clara ran toward me, her face streaked with soot and tears. "The children are safe," she said quickly, "but one of the staff, he went back inside to rescue a boy who was trapped." "Is he?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "He didn't make it." I felt my legs weaken. I asked for his name. "His name was Daniel," she said softly. "He was one of the first orphans from Hope House, Chicago. He grew up, went to college, and came back to work here." My chest tightened. I couldn't speak. The boy who once owed his life to Hope House had given it back. That night, as the fire flickered out and silence took over, I sat alone in the garden behind the ruined wing. The charred remains of the wall still carried the faint letters of our motto, "When love becomes your legacy, you never really die." I whispered to the ashes, "I failed you, Dad. I failed him." Clara knelt beside me. "No, Michael, you didn't fail. You gave him a reason to love others the way your father loved you." Her words sank into me like sunlight through the smoke, but still I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was changing. The next morning, I collapsed during a press briefing. My vision blurred, my heart pounding violently. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed, again. The doctor looked at me gravely. "Your heart's failing faster than we thought. You might need a transplant." I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of time pressing down. "How long do I have?" I asked. He hesitated. "Months, maybe less." I nodded silently. That night, I couldn't sleep. The machines beeped beside me, steady but fragile, like a ticking clock counting down. I closed my eyes and spoke softly to the empty room. "Dad, I'm tired, but I don't want to stop yet, not until I know Hope House can live without me." A few days later, Clara came with a visitor, a young woman holding a little boy's hand. "This is Daniel's sister, and this is his son, Noah." The boy looked up at me, clutching a small wooden toy. "My daddy said you were a hero," he whispered. My throat tightened. "Your daddy was the hero, Noah," I said gently. "He saved lives. I just tried to build a place where heroes like him could grow." The boy smiled, then placed the toy in my hand. "He made it for you before—" He paused, not finishing the sentence. It was a tiny wooden villa, carved roughly but with care. I held it close, tears falling freely. That night, I dreamed of my father again. We were sitting on the old porch, the sun setting over the garden. He looked at me with that same warm smile. "You did well, son," he said. "You kept the promise. But it's ending. My time's running out." He shook his head. "No, it's just beginning. You've planted something that will keep growing long after you're gone." When I woke, the first rays of dawn were streaming through the window. Clara was asleep in the chair beside me. I looked at her, at the small wooden villa on my bedside table, and felt a strange peace settle over me. Maybe my father was right. Maybe legacy isn't measured in years lived, but in hearts touched.
I didn't know what would happen next, whether I'd live long enough to see another Hope House open, but I knew one thing for certain. Even if my heart stopped, the love that built all this would keep beating somewhere, forever. The morning air outside the hospital was cold and still when I was finally discharged. My heart was weak, the doctors said, but I was stubborn. I refused to rest when there was still work to do. Clara begged me to take it easy, but I told her, if I have only a few months left, I'll spend them where my father would have wanted me to be. She didn't argue. Instead, she drove me back to the villa, the first Hope House we ever built. The children ran to greet me, their laughter echoing through the courtyard like sunlight after a storm. The roses in the garden were blooming again, their petals glistening with dew. I sat on the old wooden bench where my father used to sit, feeling the breeze brush against my face. Every corner of that house carried a memory. The smell of fresh paint, the sound of hammers, the first laughter of rescued children. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a heartbeat that never stopped. Days passed gently. Each morning I'd wake up early, walk through the garden, and sit with the children during breakfast. Sometimes I'd tell them stories about my father, the man who taught me that love wasn't about what you owned, but what you gave away. At night, I'd look at the stars and talk to him in silence, thanking him for giving me a second chance. But my body was failing fast. There were nights I'd wake up gasping for air, clutching my chest, and Clara would rush in, panic in her eyes. "You need to go back to the hospital," she'd say, but I'd smile weakly. "Not yet. There's something I still need to do." One evening, I called all the children, the staff, and Clara to the garden. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting a soft glow over everyone's faces. I stood slowly, holding a folder in my trembling hands. "I've written my will," I said. "But it's not about money or property. It's about legacy." I handed Clara the folder. "When I'm gone, you'll take charge of Hope House. Expand it. Keep it alive. Promise me it will never become about fame or politics. It must always be about love." Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. Then I turned to the children. "You are the reason I wake up every day. You are my father's dream continued. One day some of you will grow up and leave, but wherever you go, carry this house inside your heart. Be kind. Be brave. Be the light someone else needs." The little boy Noah, holding the wooden villa his father had made, stepped forward and placed it in my lap again. "So you don't forget us," he said. I smiled, tears blurring my vision. "I could never forget you," I whispered. That night, as the lanterns flickered and laughter faded into quiet, I lay in my bed near the garden window. The moonlight poured in gently, silver and soft. I could hear the wind moving through the trees, and in that sound I almost heard my father's voice. "You did it, son. You turned pain into purpose." My breathing grew shallow, but there was no fear, only warmth. My last thought was of the villa filled with laughter, love, and children's footsteps echoing through the halls. Then everything went still. Morning came quietly. Clara found me sitting peacefully by the window, the wooden villa resting in my hand, a faint smile on my face. The news of my passing spread quickly, and soon people from all over the world, donors, volunteers, children who had once lived in Hope House, came to pay their respects. But Clara didn't hold a funeral in a church or hall. She held it right there, in the garden, under the same sky where everything had begun. She planted a tree where my bench used to be and hung a sign beneath it that read, "Love never dies." Years passed. Hope House grew across continents. New homes opened in Africa, Asia, Europe. Every wall carried a small wooden carving of the villa, the same one Noah's father had made, symbolizing that the spirit of the first house still lived on. Noah grew up, studied architecture, and designed the next generation of Hope houses, each one brighter, safer, filled with life. On the 20th anniversary of Hope House, Clara stood on the stage beside Noah. Behind them, a huge banner read, "Michael's dream lives on." Noah spoke to the crowd, his voice steady but full of emotion. He once told me that legacy isn't about what you leave behind, but who you leave it with. And he left it with us, all of us. The crowd applauded, and as hundreds of lanterns rose into the night sky, their golden glow reflected in Clara's eyes, she looked upward, whispering, "He'd be proud." And perhaps somewhere beyond the clouds, a father and son watched it all together. The house they built, the lives they changed, and the love that refused to die. Because, in the end, the villa that once caused pain became the greatest symbol of hope the world had ever seen. A story that began with betrayal ended with redemption, and a son who once destroyed his father's home ended up building homes for thousands.